Gospel according to St. Luke, the 13th chapter.
Glory to you, O Lord.
Now Jesus was teaching in one of the synagogues on the Sabbath. And just then there appeared a woman with a spirit that had crippled her for 18 years. She was bent over and was quite unable to stand straight. When Jesus saw her, he called her over and said, "Woman, you are set free from your ailment." When he had laid his hands on her, immediately she stood up straight and began praising God. But the leader of the synagogue, indignant because Jesus had cured on the Sabbath, kept saying to the crowd, "There are 6 days on which work ought to be done. Come on those days and be cured, and not on the Sabbath day." But the Lord answered and said, "You hypocrites! Does not each one of you on the Sabbath untie his ox or his donkey from the manger and lead it away to give it water? And ought not this woman, a daughter of Abraham, who Satan bound for 18 long years, be set free from this bondage on the Sabbath day?" When he had said this, all his opponents were put to shame, and the entire crowd was rejoicing at all the wonderful things that he was doing. This is the gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, O Christ. You may be seated. So there was this man, this old man, this desperate man, who had an equally desperate wife. They had spent a lifetime amassing land, property, stuff, wealth. They were quite successful in what they were doing. The only thing was that they did not have any children. They could not bear any children. So all that they had amassed, all that they had acquired, would be passed off to somebody in a far-off place. They had given up hope for a man until God intervened. God intervened and called this desperate old man and his equally desperate wife to leave their country, to leave their home, and to go to a far-off place. Now this man, faithful and righteous, obeys, taking with him his wife and all that he could carry. And 25 years after God intervened in this desperate old man and his equally desperate wife's life, the two of them bear a son. And 100 years old, Abraham held his son. From Isaac, 2 sons were born, Esau and Jacob. From Jacob, 12 sons were born. Jacob was renamed Israel. And from those 12 sons, a nation is born. Swaddled and loved under the care of Pharaoh for 430 years, the nation of Israel returns to the promised land, small in number, but a great world power. Israel dominated in all it did. It built splendid places and palaces. A line of kings not forgotten, still talked about today. Israel held to the Lord and they became awesome. They went from nothing to the top of the heap. From a couple of desperate old people. I'll say 190 is probably good for the old people. To a great nation. From almost nothing to incredible riches. Once the nation of Israel had defeated all its foes, taken its place in the promised land, built its palaces, and all that it desired to build, once it had acquired peace and power and comfort and prestige, it decided that the ways of the Lord were, well, oppressive. They were not happy with what God wanted. Tithing, study of the Word, worship, sacrifice. They wanted all of God's power and might. They wanted the divine protection, but could not be bothered to give back anything. They outright stood against the Lord. They decried his precepts, and somehow foolishly believed that God would not care. That God had taught it off to play golf somewhere around Pluto. It wasn't paying attention. Funny how history unlearned is repeated. So, of course, Paul says, God is not mocked, and the greatest nation begins to crumble under its own gossip, falsity, lies, evil, finger-pointing, idolatry, greed, power, comfort, hatred, pretty much all the things that God despises. And so God, after sending the prophets and the prophets and the prophets, decides to have a conversation with the Babylonians. And God sends the Babylonians along because God is not going to tolerate the chosen people acting in such accord. So the Babylonians come along, they come in from the north, wipe out the 10 northern tribes, take the 2 southern tribes into captivity. 2 generations of captivity with the promise of restoration, which does come. Which is what we get from this portion of Isaiah. Yet here is the rub. Here is what God says to Isaiah to say to the people. In order for restoration to happen, in order to return from Babylon to the promised land, some things need to be different. For God has not taught it off to play golf at Pluto, and God is not mocked, and God will not return the people of Israel to glory while still behaving in the way that God despises. If you remove the yoke from among you, if you remove the pointing of fingers, the speaking of evil, if you offer your food to the hungry and satisfy the needs of the afflicted, then your light shall rise in the darkness and your gloom be like the noonday. If you take away that which is despised by God, then you will be restored. That is the word of Isaiah to the people of Israel in the Babylonian captivity. If you stop doing what you were doing to which God put you here, then God will take you back. If you allow that which God despises to remain, then God will not. So, if you want to hang out in Babylon, keep doing what you do. If you want the blessing restored, well then remove that which God despises. God will not bless those who act in ways that God despises, which then would require the people who have long since stopped caring about the Word to return to the Word and study that which God desires and despises. For God, ignorance is not an excuse when one has been introduced to God. For the expectation is that the believer knows the boundaries and lives within them. So Israel does not just get blanket restoration, some form of cheap grace. They have to work for it. One cannot act against God and then in turn expect God to bless one with abundance. God shows no concern for riches or land or influence. God does not care about family names. God does not show any kind of deference or partiality. And restoration, though they returned to the land, did not happen for many, many generations. Humorous how the cycle, the unlearned pattern continues. The struggle of those who wish to enjoy and participate in false speech, lies, evil, hatred, division, navel-gazing, hurt, destruction, and yet question how it is that God, who despises such things, would not in turn bless those actions. When any faith community, when any person like the Israel of power, forget how it came to be, who provides its resources, who gives it life, when any community or person forgets the word, turns from the precepts, when any community or person, like the people of Israel, choose comfort and division and trust in mammon, and has little regard for the guidance of God, but much time for gossip and destruction, that community or that person cannot expect God to pour forth blessings. Restoration happens. Transformation in God happens when the evil and lies and gossip and division and hurt and hate and isolation are driven out. Restoration happens when the people come back to the Word and not despise it. When the people care what God has to say and not ignore it. Restoration happens when the believer drives out that which God despises and escorts in that which God desires. For God has not ever and will not ever at the same time despise something and bless it. We see that in the nation of Israel. We see that in the Scriptures, even into the New Testament. God is not mocked and God will not be fooled. So if blessings are not coming, struggle is there. If God seems so far off, then one must ask, is God no longer God? Has God stopped caring? Which of course we know is not true. Or is there something growing that shouldn't be growing? Has something taken root in the heart of the believer that is so insidious, yet so desired that it is allowed to grow? Is there a presence that is despised by God that is not rooted out? Are the ways of the Lord important? And if so, have they taken root? Listen to the words again of the prophet Isaiah, given to the people. If you remove the yoke from among you, the pointing of the finger, the speaking of evil, if you offer your food to the hungry and satisfy the needs of the afflicted, then your light shall rise in the darkness, and your gloom be like the noonday. If then